Blog Talk Radio.
And he would know what's best for me and my family because he's a doctor. So we all got flu shots.
Did you know the vitamins and nutrients will be illegal in the year 2010 if we don't awaken the sheeple? These globalists are murderous, they about to hook it up. Codex Alimentarius, baby, look it up. They spray you from the sky like roaches. Does it shock you? Don't worry, they got a pill for you. Ask your doctor. Are your legs restless? Are you shy? Forget the side effects, not that many people die. Genetically modified foods are the bomb. They gave lab rats cancer, but please don't be alarmed. Soon GMO foods will be a staple. The only thing you'll be able to put on your kitchen table. Their own documents have shown no food shall be grown that Monsanto don't own. Worldwide, there ain't nowhere to run. Thanks to World Trade Organization and International Monetary Fund. We the sheeple of America, America, America. Simply the sheeple of America. We the sheeple of America. 100 plus of the world's wealthiest people meet every June to see to it their plan is complete. Prime ministers, presidents, billionaires, CEOs, international bankers, C3POs. Also known as the young psychopaths who fawn over their elders and give them charts and graphs, pondering how to reduce the population, injecting our boys and girls with poisonous inoculations. Yum, yum, mercury's good, at least the news will tell you that, and they certainly should, cause they're owned by the CFR, but who cares about the Royal Institute of International Affairs? Jerry Springer's on, yeah, 2 transvestites are about to fist fight, Meanwhile, they're making plans for the order of the new world, about to send the lambs to the slaughter. You think they care about 3,000 American men, women, and children? They about to kill a couple billion. If you're in the dark, my friend, you might despise my words, but you had the wool pulled over your eyes. We the sheeple of America, America, America. We the sheeple of America. We the sheeple of America. Collectively in a trance, we like to dance and make romance. 2 psychopaths who plot hysteria. We the sheeple of America. Much different from that of your great-great-grandma. Say hello to your new puppet, Barack Hussein Obama. The president don't run a thing, my dear. You can stick an intelligent orangutan in there. It wouldn't mean a daggone thing. You're owned by Goldman Sachs. Get on your knees and kiss the Queen's big ring. They took away your vision with blink. And in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is always king. In other words, they got the republic by the throat. Your vote don't count because they count the votes. He'll never tell you where you're headed, you nerd. The good shepherd never sharpens his knives in front of the herd. That's why you keep your head down, grazing in the grass. Before you know it, now you're in a whole nother pasture. They keep you sucking on the saccharin and aspartame. It's eating your brain, what a disaster. Glued to the tube to see what your favorite star's doing. The corporate news is faker than a cartoon. Even Justin Napolitano said you're just a nation of sheep. Some get slaughtered, some get fleeced. We the sheeple of America, America, America. We the sheeple of America. We the sheeple of America.
It's Blog Talk Radio Zone 4D. It's my opinion. Tonight we are having a show, How to Become Your Own Lawyer, with guest and co-host Dennis Ford and Rob Johnson, who is author of Sujuris Law. He has a Facebook page, and he's an author of his book. And we'll be describing a little bit about Sujuris Law, what it is, how we can apply it in our everyday lives, and basically how it's our own responsibilities to claim our rights and apply them in everyday situations, everything from driving a car to, just being out there in the world and living everyday life. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring Dennis in. Dennis, you with me there?
Yeah, I'm here, bro. How you doing?
All right, man. How you been?
Good. I wanted to go ahead and help the best I could tonight with the show. I know how much this show means to you. Being friends with Rob and following his work, and a lot of interesting stuff to go over in tonight's show. And I'll probably be like the majority of listeners tonight, just trying to learn what I can about self-governing and things that we kind of touched on the first episode. Maybe we can get more in depth and cover a couple more things tonight. And Rob's actually online too, so whenever you're ready, we can bring him in.
Yeah, let me let me give a brief description of what sui juris law is actually defined as, and we'll go ahead and bring Rob in right after that.
Okay.
So, for those who haven't, the first episode we had was basically sui juris law 101. It was an introduction to what sui juris law is, what it represents. Sui juris law actually means of his own right or of his own authority, possessing full and social and civil rights, having capacity to manage one's own affairs. As defined by Beauvair's Law Dictionary, 1856 edition, sui juris, one who has all the rights to which a free man is entitled, one who is not under the power of another, as a slave, a minor, and the like. To make a valid contract, a person must in general be sui juris. Everyone of full age is presumed to be sui juris. There's also Black Law Edition 6. There's, if you go to the Facebook group, sui juris law at Facebook, they have definitions too as well. But we can bring in Rob and get Rob's take on that.
All right. I'll go ahead and bring him in. Give me 1 second. Hey, Rob, you're with us. Can you hear me?
I can hear everyone, and I am loving the show so far. It's going to be a good one tonight.
Yeah, welcome, man.
Since the title of the show tonight is How to Become Your Own Lawyer, that's probably the very first thing I should touch on. Everyone already is their own lawyer. The moment you were born, you claimed those rights from your birthright, you became the master of your own law. And the only way people have lost this power is they've given it away by their own signed consent and registration contracts. And now all they have to do is act how they want to be perceived. If you want to be sovereign, you act sovereign. If you want to become your own lawyer, just realize that you already are. An attorney is something far different from a lawyer. An attorney is one who speaks for someone else. A lawyer is simply someone who is schooled in and knowledgeable enough to manage their own affairs at law. So every American is a lawyer and master of their own rights and responsibilities to those rights. I mean, rights don't just come with no price. You have a duty to claim and exercise those rights to make sure that they exist for future generations.
Right.
That's right. That's part of the reason why we're doing these shows right here, Rob. And we agree on a lot of things. And I was wondering, would you like to explain to our audience exactly why attorneys are not lawyers, and a little bit about the bar, as you were, just defining how we are our own lawyers, and in reality, to have an attorney represent us, in my opinion, that's almost just as saying, here, let the judge perceive me, and, the jury and whomever, perceive me how they want to be perceived as an attorney. You can get a court-appointed attorney, and they're actually working for the courts in itself.
Oh, that's absolutely right. Every attorney is a officer of the court. They work for the court. They don't work for their client. The duties of an attorney are first to the court and then to their client. So only if there's no conflict with the duties of the court do they act on behalf of the client. The moment someone hires an attorney, they've declared themselves of child mentality status, which is you're having someone represent you, to speak for you. The only thing anyone should ever do with any attorney is to have them provide them with assistance of counsel. That is what your lawful right is too. There is no such thing as a right to have an attorney appointed for you by a court. It just doesn't exist. What you have a right to is assistance of counsel. This means anyone that you feel is competent to advise you in matters of law. They can act as an agent for you, but they do not speak for you. You speak for yourself, and you simply receive advice from your assistant. Having an attorney, you have a bar member, an agent of the Crown of England, whose allegiances are to a foreign king, have nothing to do with American law. Of course, anyone who would hire someone who has a foreign allegiance is deemed by a court to be of a child mentality status or an idiot because they don't work for you. They work for the Crown of England. And the courts are all owned by the Crown of England.
That's why it's referred to as the bar. I mean, that's why they say the American Bar Association, because there's nothing American about it.
Right. The American Bar Association is just a subsidiary branch of the bar. No different than McDonald's. The McDonald's across the world in all different countries are owned by one parent corporation. The parent corporation of the bar exists in England. Every single state branch of bar is just a franchisee branch of the English bar.
Wow.
And every attorney has exchanged their oath of allegiance for a noble title, Esquire. No branch of the American government can grant a title of nobility. So if someone has a title of nobility, they've exchanged an oath of allegiance to a foreign power to get that oath. It's usually the Crown of England.
And for attorneys, that's the British Accredited Registry?
Yes.
How do I pronounce that? I'm sorry.
British Accreditation Registry is the bar.
There we go. And like I said, there's nothing American about it. And to touch on, to kind of give an example on how Rob was saying, we void our rights and we give up what we already have, at a price. And, basically in the Constitution it states that, we have the right to travel freely without interruption. That means that, a cop needs even a warrant to pull you over, whether you're walking down the street or driving a car. And, basically what Rob was trying to say is that when we sign our names, when we go and we get a permit to operate a vehicle, that is when we are then voiding our right, the right that we already have and the duty that we have to exercise that. We then void that. We give that right up to oblige by DMV and, mobility standards.
That's absolutely right. As soon as you sign that registration contract, you've given up all of your rights, and you've agreed that these statutory rules have force of law over you. That's what the contract is about.
Right.
So when you waive those rights, you can no longer stand upon them in court. That's where most people have their problem.
That's why it's really important to kind of understand, the of his own rights to juris and what we represent. And the reason being is ultimately most of us, in order to actually kind of control or to attain what we have and apply that in everyday life, we first must look at the perception of how we're viewed by, senators, congressmen, people, of higher, people who are politicians and whatnot, because they're the ones who, enact laws. And laws are actually supposed to be to protect the people. And if you notice, laws nowadays, they don't do that. They actually revoke type of rights that we have.
Well, that's absolutely right. All they do today is they pass statutes.
Right.
And statutes are definitely not laws.
Yeah, we got a little bit of an echo too. I don't know if somebody's playing the show in the background, but we're picking up that. I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, that tends to happen to us a lot.
Yeah, we can't seem to get a show going where we don't have some kind of technical. It's the best shows too. If it's just a regular show, we're just talking, nothing. But when we have these really important shows, it's always something. But
I don't know if that goes on my end, but it seems to be happening when I'm talking most.
But all that was very interesting. I mean, that's knowledge that a lot of people don't know about, and it's sad that people don't know this stuff.
It is. It is. It's lack of responsibility too. I mean, it's. As Rob was saying last time, and earlier, it's something that a child can understand and learn to apply simply because it's their right to do. They're born with this. It's your quote unquote, God-given right, if you'd like to say, or your natural right, or your birthright. To obtain this knowledge in order to apply it in everyday life, because of the fact that the hierarchy of the social system, they look at us through, and they view us actually through our social security numbers and our birth certificates. So the ultimate goal, really, for us is to apply our knowledge in order to obtain the certificate of ownership back. So that way we can be in our sovereign dignity. And Rob can help me explain this better, but in order to help protect ourselves, we must understand how they view us, and how they view us is via ownership of our birth certificates through UCC and UPC, Universal Commercial Code Numbers, and Universal Purchase Code Numbers. And that actually relates to our birth certificate, which then in turn relates us to being stock. So I don't know about the listeners, but I don't want to be represented or viewed as stock in any form.
Right.
Yeah. Basically, we've been turned into the commodity that backs the dollar because of the stock that exists.
That's right. And we all have an opportunity to do something about that. And, the thing is that, like we discussed last episode, I believe, is applying our right to obtain our birth certificates back. And, in doing so, you void yourself as that second-class citizen. And, you're then taking that next step into, the sovereignty movement.
Yes, this is how you reclaim your sovereignty, is by getting rid of all of those contracts where you've waived your right. I mean, this is something that I've been working on recently. A friend of mine got arrested for driving without a license, or with a revoked license. And just because you're exercising one right doesn't mean you have to waive other rights. Like, you don't have any kind of obligation to possess identification whatsoever. And this even means when you're in a car. Just because you're exercising the right to travel doesn't mean you have any kind of duty to then waive your right to privacy or to carry some kind of a license to identify who you are.
That's right. And they consist, and things like, I do understand that, people, they can argue the point, okay, well, what about drunk drivers and stuff like that? Well, when somebody's driving reckless and out of control, that's something different. That's not just traveling from point A to point B type thing with, without having your rights violated, such as DUI checkpoints and, things of that, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, that type of thing, who sponsor and actually host these type of checkpoints. No one is obligated to stop at these and oblige to these violations of our rights. This isn't, in Nazi Germany, that's when you had to prove who you were, or what state you represented for traveling from point A to point B.
Right.
Right.
And
I
that's
think
where we're
that
heading.
American jurisprudence, First Constitutional Law 329, explains it very well so everyone understands. That the right of a citizen to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property thereon by horse-drawn carriage, wagon, or automobile is not a privilege which can be permitted or prohibited at will. It's a common right that he has under the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And under this constitutional guarantee, one may therefore, under normal conditions, travel at his inclination along the public highways or in the places, and while conducting himself in an orderly and decent manner, neither interfering with, not disturbing another's rights, he shall be protected, not only in his person, but in his safe conduct. Of course, this wouldn't apply to someone who's drunk and is driving. You can't safely operate an automobile while you're drunk.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah.
if you're putting other people's rights at jeopardy, then exactly.
Right. It's not going to work if you're drunk, at a checkpoint. You have to approach it with a certain level of responsibility. First off,
you'd have to be intoxicated to approach one of those things in the first place and actually stop.
Exactly.
I wouldn't. I would never stop at those. That's a breach of my rights, and I would never oblige. I would never oblige to that. Never.
I've repeatedly driven through those checkpoints myself. They will not come after me. They don't want to because it's not worth the headache. They're just going to end up liable to pay for any ticket they write me anyway.
Right.
That's proven on your website as well, Rob. I mean, if you want to go ahead and give that information out there as well.
Yes, my website is www.suijurislaw.net. It's suejurislaw.net. I sell my book on my website. The book's name is Sui Juris, the Law of Full Age, Your Sovereign Claim to Unalienable Individual Rights. And every American is already sovereign. They were born that way. So there is nothing that you really have to do to become sovereign except realize that you already are.
That's right.
Right.
That's.
But it's like all the many things.
One of the
main
things that I want. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say real quick. It's like all the things that they already. It's out there, but people don't know about it. Like it's hidden. People don't. We talk about it all the time on the shows. People don't read books anymore. They don't want to educate. They want everything instant. Everything has to be right away.
Mm.
So they would never take time to learn any of this. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think that that's really changing. I really do. I think more and more people are getting inclined to learn this.
And to actually see results of what one obtains when they do apply these rights. If you go to Rob's website, you can actually see he has his tickets up there of which was presented to him by a lovely officer that was violating his rights, and he complied with the back of the ticket and replied and gave them a timely manner to do the same, in which, Rob, if you wanted to explain that, it's also on your website, too, if people want to go there and look at that as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's the same exact thing that they're trying to do to you is no one really gets in trouble for what they did to get a ticket. People get in trouble in court for what they didn't do after they got it, which is respond to that ticket.
Right.
Most tickets have it written right on there that you have to respond within a given amount of time. A response can mean many things. The best option you have is conditional acceptance. You accept that they've given you a notice, but you don't understand what they're trying to say. So you respond and you offer discussion to avoid conflict. Your response discharges their notice. So you've already taken the first step just by responding, and they're not set up to respond to you, so you'll always end up in a situation where they're in default instead of you.
Right.
So basically, like when, what were you ticketed with? I'm sorry, forgot.
It was inspection was expired and the registration was suspended, and the plates were suspended.
See, and all you had to do was apply yourself by replying to the number on the back of the card, or on the back of the ticket, and reply to them stating that they're in default of what's going on because they're in violation of this or that.
Right. Basically what I did was I asked them to provide me with a signed bill and a copy of the contract that makes me liable to pay that bill. That if they could provide that, I would happily pay according to a contract, but they could not produce that because it doesn't exist. There is no contract, so they cannot bill me. I don't owe anybody any money for these contracts because I'm not in contract.
That's right. You're not bounded in one. You're not bounded into a contract, which means that you don't have a license, correct?
Exactly. I have no commercial interests. I do not do business on the roads. That's the inherent nature of the driver's license itself, is it's commercial. Again, I can go back to Supreme Court rulings on this. No. Hold on one second. Let me find this real quick.
Well, yeah, while you're looking for that, basically is what Rob's saying is that the only people who need driver's license are people who are on the road selling commercial product or transferring product goods for services rendered for financial gain. Correct?
Or people like operating a taxi or a bus. Here's the Supreme Court ruling on it now. It's the right of the citizen to travel upon the highway and to transport his property thereon in the ordinary course of life and business differs radically and obviously from one that makes the highway his place of business and uses it for private gain in the running of a stagecoach or omnibus. The former is the usual and extraordinary right of the citizen, a common right to all. The latter is special, unusual, and extraordinary. And that's ex parte Dickey.
And that basically is what that's saying is that if you're, and that, see, that's another way how they get us is because, you know, as defined, a person is not a person because they have rights and duties ascribed to them by the state. And I believe
right,
that
a person is a person because they're in commercial contract.
That's right. That's exactly right. So
and this is not something that the courts have only ruled on in a limited nature. There's an oppressive array of cases regarding this. Here's another one of them, and it's 3 different rulings on the same. It's for while a citizen has the right to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property thereon, the right does not extend to the use of the highways in whole or in part as a place for private gain. The latter, no person has a vested right to use the highways of the state. It's a privilege or license which may be legislature or granted at its discretion. So they can only legislate or permit the commercial activity. They cannot legislate the right.
Right.
And if they are legislating your right, most likely you're representing yourself as a 14th Amendment citizen, one who is
exactly
to federal and state
because
laws
of those contracts. You've waived your right, and you've agreed to statutory rules.
Like ownership of property and stuff like that. It says in our Constitution that we're not, no citizen shall pay taxes under foreign dignities or foreign entities. And every time we pay our taxes, anybody who pays their taxes is basically considered a second-class citizen or a 14th Amendment citizen because of the fact that they're voiding their constitutional right to not be taxed by, a foreign entity, which is, I think, the reason why we had, a Revolutionary War or something like that.
That's exactly right.
Regardless of that fact, I mean, that's another good example of, all wars are, in a sense, bought and paid for before, one bullet comes out the chamber, 1 ounce of sweat or blood is even shed. And, that sort of goes to show it. Because we never technically we're still under British rule, and that's what makes us subject to being citizens, is because we never technically broke away from that.
Right.
I can go into great detail with that as
we actually I didn't mean to jump in here, but we actually had a question from somebody here on Facebook. They were asking, is it very hard to get Supreme Court rulings brought up before a judge?
No, it shouldn't be hard to bring them up. All you got to do is speak them verbally. You can read them to the judge. All the lower courts are bound by these Supreme Court rulings. Unless a judge wants to stake his reputation and career to change precedent, these rulings that I cite have never been overturned. They will not be overturned by the courts. They accept them blindly. Of course they will listen to these rulings. And if they don't, they're insane. They're not a court. I'm going to walk out the door. If they throw out the law, that judge is not a judge, it's not a court, and I don't owe anyone an explanation for anything.
A court is not a court technically to begin with in the first place, because, not one in which a citizen should be prosecuted, because of the fact that when you go into a courtroom nowadays, and it's been like this for as long as I can remember, there's gold fringe on the flag. Gold fringe represents a lot of things. First of all, during the Revolutionary War, they actually tacked a flag onto a stump to represent that they are in a time of war. Nowadays, we hang gold fringe from our flags. We hang flags up that have gold fringe descending from them, which represents that we are in a time of war. And being so in a time of war, when you walk into a courtroom and you see that flag, you are under Admiralty maritime law ownership or entitlement type deal, which means that they're representing you underneath something that is completely obsidious to the point.
That's absolutely right. Technically, it's British Admiralty maritime law. And it's not a judge, it's a tribunal. It's not a court, unless you agree it's a court. The American court system, law and equity, has been merged. So there are courts of law and courts of equity that exist within the same time and place. You just have to know how to stand in law and not jump yourself into equity by your own signed consent. That's what you do in those registration contracts. You agree to British Maritime Admiralty law.
Right, and that's basically what you're saying when you step into a courtroom and you see that. The first thing you should say is that you should have the court recognize that you are not you're not a Navy, you're not a Marine, you're not under any type of governmental type status of that nature to be represented in that type of court.
That's exactly what you do. That's exactly what you do when you show up by special appearance, sui juris. Sui juris is the only status you can claim in court to present yourself instead of represent yourself and lose your standing. Is everyone there?
So...
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
When you appear in court, even statuses like pro se or pro per, those are statuses of representation. Sui juris is the only status you can claim of your own right to present yourself in court. That status is your standing. Your standing is your rights. But if you've waived your rights in these registration contracts, you're going to have some trouble with that, which is why you revoke them by notices. You have evidence that these contracts no longer hold any force over you. So you can then appear in court sui juris to speak for yourself, to present yourself, and to stand upon your rights. And in these situations, these statutory rules have absolutely no force over you.
Right. Yeah, and I read that wrong, too. That wasn't a question. That was somebody saying it's hard to get Supreme Court, rulings brought up in front of a judge. But I thought they were asking a question. But, Yeah, exactly.
I include Supreme Court rulings in my motions and notices. And once it's on the record, it's on the record. The judge can't refuse to read something. That would be blind, gross negligence.
Right. That makes sense.
The biggest problem people have is they accept plea bargains. They won't take a matter to trial. They rely on the advice of some attorney who has no interest in their affairs, except making their money.
Yeah, that's why they call them court-appointed attorneys. They're being represented by the court. And
instead of it being 2-on-1, it becomes 3-on-1. Your lawyer, the judge, and the prosecutor all work against you.
That's exactly why we need to claim responsibility for our own actions and our rights and apply them to our everyday rights.
That's it. The best way to win in court is to never get there in the first place. And this begins with what you do and how you deal with police officers who want to charge you with these statutory violations.
Yeah, we can get into that too.
Well, that's
I
one of
think
the
that's
reasons
a great
why
place to
they're
start.
out there too.
Right.
The first thing people have to do now that they're aware of what their rights are from Sue Juris 101 is start to assert them and exercise them. I mean, if people aren't even willing to assert their rights to a police officer, they might as well not even have them.
That's very true.
And by not asserting them, they're abandoning them.
Yep.
That's right. There's a difference between saying to an officer, I know my rights, and, actually applying it. What's up?
That's right. The proper response to license, registration, and insurance is, are you accusing me of a crime? Because no one has any obligation of law to present any kind of identification or to even tell anyone their name unless and until they're accused of a crime. And that doesn't include these statutory infractions. A crime is the damage of someone else's property or body or the violation of their rights. If those elements don't exist, there's no lawful cause of action. They can't even pull you over.
See, it becomes unreal when, people who are bound to protect citizens via their duties of, peace officer, judicialship, what have you, that they're basically, it's not different entities. It's a complete system that is driven by literally people. And these people are out there every day. They walk around not knowing their rights, and they're not applying their actual your actual life, you actually living, has to do with being able to have free thought, individualism, to be able to be oneself without having to be labeled or grouped or bunched together or categorized or bagged and tagged. And that's basically what they're doing to us, and we're allowing this to happen by not stepping back and asserting our responsibilities. We have a civil duty as citizens to get out of the citizen definition. The range of the definition of citizen, first class, second class, and, sovereign is not related to citizen, but it would be sovereign inhabitant.
Right. Right now, the most practical method for exercising rights without a permit is just to exercise your rights and realize you don't need a permit. I mean, no one needs permission to do something they have a lawful right to do, and a permit is a permission. I mean, no one has a requirement to get a permit to go to church or to host a religious assembly or anything like that. It's just not existent, and no one has a requirement to acquire a permit to exercise any other right either. To keep and bear arms is a lawful right. You could wear a gun on your hip. You don't have to have any kind of registration or permit to have that gun, as long as you're not brandishing your weapon or harassing people or otherwise causing actual violation of rights or damage to people. You have every right to carry that gun and do what you please to defend yourself.
Right. We have
no one has
actually,
to have a permit to do that either.
Yeah, we actually have a couple callers. I think people have questions, or they can add to what we're talking about here. If you guys want to take a call.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Bring them in here. 928, you're live.
Hello. How you doing, Dennis?
How you doing, Paul?
Brandon? My name is Paul, and I have two different experiences to tell exactly what y'all are saying is fact. One happened in New Mexico. I'm an Arizona resident, and I was traveling through New Mexico. State trooper stops me, gives me 3 citations. I tell him, basically, you want me to help you go fight a fire? Anyway, all 3 of those was dropped, and then here in Arizona, I actually went before a judge, and I represented myself, and I got all 3 of my charges dropped due to the fact that I knew what my rights were, and I knew how to apply the law that I know versus their color of law, and I got all 3 of those dropped. So what you're saying here is very factual, and it does work, and one must know their rights in order to defend them.
Thank you.
That's exactly right. The first step in the battle is knowing where your weapons are. Weapons today, guns and bombs aren't going to win this war. It's ideas and knowledge of rights that's going to win the day.
Very true.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
awesome.
Thanks for calling in, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great to hear, man. The very first caller, and that they're actually. That's great. That's good to hear. I'm glad to know that there are other people out there who actually live to juris.
Well, as it is, 98% of all people who get a ticket just blindly pay it. That rate can only decrease. And more every day people are starting to apply this to their everyday lives and realize that their rights supersede all statutory acts, and if they haven't caused any harm, they don't owe anyone anything.
Right.
And you know what? A lot of people, like me and Dennis were talking about earlier, a lot of people like to sit back and say, oh, well, nobody, I've been doing this for 30-some-odd years, or, I grew up with all this, hating anti-capitalist, what have you. And, they basically, in a sense, they're defending the system because they're saying that they've tried to fight against it for so long that it's worth giving up on. Well, if you go to our Facebook group pages, all right, you can see daily the number of people increase. That right there is proof and knowledge enough that there is enough information out there where people are actually attributing this.
And this
Right,
is not
again,
a rarity. The dismissal of charges is a routine experience with people who just stand up for their rights and know the law.
Right, I was going to throw in real quick. Thanks to Paul for calling in. He's one of my friends from Facebook. He's been around for a while. Good to hear that too. I think that was really important to add that to the show there. But we do have another caller that's been on hold for a while. If you guys want to take that.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. 1 second here. 701, you're on the air. Hello?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I took 2 years of pre-law at community college, and it really amazed me. The very first sentence of the first paragraph of my introduction to law book stated that the purpose of a law was to control the population. And, if you look back historically, that's an antithesis to the role our government is meant to play in our lives. In the Declaration of Independence, it says that each man is born with certain unalienable rights, and that to secure those rights, governments are instituted amongst men. And we have become since the Reconstruction era and with the envelope of the federal government that laws are restrictive to our rights. And I know for a fact, that what the host is saying is 100% true. You know, most people, I've spent some time in courtrooms and stuff, and it amazes me that the number of people that just go in and they have no clue of their rights. They really don't care about their rights, and they just go along with the system. And one thing that I've noticed with laws is the wording of laws are written in such a way as to trick a person into compliance without even realizing, or to admit that they've done wrong without even realizing it, you know, and it's all a kind of a big trick to control you, you know, and that's one thing I will say with the Bar Association, you know, they are officers of the court first and foremost. I wouldn't hire an attorney. I don't care what I was charged with. I would never hire an attorney because their obligation, as the host said, is first and foremost to the court. They have to comply with the court, and then if they have room after that compliance, they'll comply with what's best for you. One question I did have for the host is on the Supreme Court cases that he read off, you know, is there anywhere where you can actually get the case name on those? Does he have that listed somewhere on his Facebook page or something?
I absolutely do. In the files section of the group, you will find a file that says license registration. Yeah, I'll get the exact file name. It'll just take 1 second.
Yeah, I wanted to expand on something real quick. As our caller was saying, how they make laws so they trick people into almost believing that it's like mandatory. Laws are meant to, first of all, they're meant to protect our rights. So any law that's being passed, not meant to protect your rights, one should automatically, that should give you some incentive to kind of pick up a little bit more information about that. I know Rob can expand on this as well. We can give an example of that. People who believe that, you know, people who believe and invest in the Obamacare, okay, they believe, most of them, yeah, right, most of them, they actually believe that it's mandatory because they have a job and their insurance is through one job and they only have that insurance, so they believe that this is a mandatory opt-in, okay, and they believe that it's like this because it's law. That, in fact, is not true.
Okay, I'm going to touch on all of this. First, the file in the group that you want to look at is license and registration, the conversion of natural and alienable individual rights into micromanaged, monitored privileges. This has all of the case law that I've cited. It has all the names and references so you can actually search the cases out and pull them up yourself. You're absolutely right. What they're passing today is not law. Law is very, very simple to read. You have a right to keep and bear arms. That's law. What they're passing are statutory acts that are filled with smoke and absolutely, as the caller said, designed to trick you. They want to make you believe that you have an obligation where you do not. The only obligation of law anyone has is to cause no harm to any other in the claim and exercise of their rights. So long as you harm no one, you're obligated to do nothing.
And that's, you know, and that's why when you see, like, you know, they had the SOPA Act, the CISPA Act, that anytime you see, that's how people who are listeners, you can differentiate between the two laws and so forth, is because the law is meant to protect you as opposed to an act is to oppress you. Okay?
Right.
That's absolutely right. Acts pretend to be law. Acts are no more law than Tom Cruise is a fighter pilot.
All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if the caller has anything else to add, he can do it now. We'll go ahead and see if we can get any more callers in. I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to add before we...
No, that was pretty much it. This is the first time that I've listened to y'all's show.
Well, thank you.
A friend of mine on the Oath Keepers group on Facebook linked it, and I decided to listen to it, and I'm definitely going to tune in from now on.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a series about this, too. I didn't know if Brandon wanted to bring that up right now, but we're going to be doing a couple more we already have one episode about this. If you go to Zone 4D on Blog Talk Radio, part 1 of this show is actually in there, and you can listen to the part 1 of this show that we did, I think, in August, first week of August.
Great. Yeah, that was another question I had, if there was an archive of the first part, because I'd definitely like to get it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of shows in there as well.
Thanks for taking my call, guys, and I'll get off and just listen now.
All right, no problem. You have a good night, man. Thanks again.
You too.
Yeah. If we don't have any other callers at the moment, I'd like to touch on allodial ownership of property and how it relates to sovereignty.
We're good.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Allodial ownership of property is a very, very simple concept. When you own property, you own it completely. You go to the store, you buy a banana. You own that property completely. You're free to dispose of it as you see fit. This is the natural state of all property ownership. Owning a home, when you own a home in allodial ownership, you have no requirements to get a permit to do anything to that home. Allodial property is not taxable. It is not seizable. It is not garnishable. It cannot be liened or otherwise encumbered by any other statutory regulation. It answers to the sole discretion of the owner. This is a fundamental birthright that was always existent. It's self-evident. And we began exercising this right when we defeated our former king. We acquired all of the rights and privileges of our former king. One of those rights was allodial ownership of property.
Right.
That's right.
The property you own as a king.
That's why all property should be owned under allodial ownership, because otherwise it's being taxed, and technically that's not ownership. That's
right. The biggest fraud today is that they no longer sell allodial property. They sell real estate. They sell you a home on someone else's land, so your tax is a rental permit for having property that exists on land you do not own.
And that land, in fact, is owned by the British Crown, which is actually why we have a president, because no person, man, or country can exceed the amount of land ownership that is ruled by the British Crown.
Exactly. It's owned by them until you declare that you own allodial ownership of that property. Allodial ownership of property is such a fundamental birthright that it cannot be denied to the people. You can simply declare it in an affidavit and file that with your county recorder. Some county recorders don't want to file this along with respect to the property, but they have an obligation to do so. And if they refuse to do so, you can charge them with dereliction of duty.
I believe that's a felony in most states except for Carolinas. I think it's a misdemeanor there for them to actually do that.
There's also a whole bunch of other charges that can go along with that, too. Gross negligence, malfeasance, misfeasance. There's a laundry list of charges you can file against them if they refuse to do what they're supposed to do. And as a maxim of law, even if they refuse to file the document, what must be done or anything that ought to be done must be seen as having been done. So the courts must recognize that this document is filed and that you have allodial ownership, whether or not the county recorder will file it. Because it ought to be done, the courts have to view it as if it had been done.
And that can also extend to other things too. Like if somebody violates your rights and you're suffering from you had the destruction of property or malice to your name, you have the right to charge that person with appropriate crimes, and with that you get affidavit of allied ownership, so you're claiming that everything that you have had is yours, as in your rights, and then say Mr. Officer or somebody like that comes along and takes it, and you're trying to press charges against them, and you're not getting any help by people of notary of respect, then you have the right to pursue them for, like Rob was saying, dereliction of duty or what have you. So if
absolutely, anytime your rights are violated, you can file charges against someone for violating your rights. You have a duty to protect your rights. No one should ever feel bad about having to file charges against someone because they're not doing their job.
Right.
That extends to all aspects of your life. So, you know,
absolutely.
If you're literally trying to, like, in order for Sujuris of his own right, of your own right, in order for this to be something, you know, a lot of people, you can't have one foot in the door. You have to have both feet on the ground, and you have to have your mind completely through that door, because if you're only going in half-assed, you're going to get half-assed results. You know, like, you're depriving yourself of one right in order to hold on to what you think is another. Okay? Most likely you already have that right entitled to you. All right? So the very first thing that we need to do is we need to claim responsibility for our actions, meaning that the first thing I would do would be to void any contract that I have that's binding me to a law, thus voiding me of a constitutional or civil right.
Well, that's exactly right. See, what these officers are doing is they will never, ever seize property that is owned in Elodium. They will not do it. These officers are seizing property that has been registered. The reason they can do this is because once you register property, it belongs to the state. So they're not taking your registered property away from you. They're taking the state's property back.
Right.
They will never seize someone's car if it is not registered. They could be charged civilly and criminally for doing so. They could be charged with Grand Theft Auto for taking your car if it's not registered.
Not in New York State. Well, I like to speak on basically experience, and from my experience, you know, I had past experience with constitutional, civil law, what have you. You know, bringing about Sujuris law in my life, one of the first things I did was reclaim my right to travel freely without interruption, which means I voided my contract of having a, quote, you know, license to drive type thing. And because I was not operating commercially, they couldn't say, oh, well, you have to get this renewed or what have you. You know, you have to possess one. And acting in that, you know, I've never been pulled over. And there's been times where I've driven right past, like, you know, we were talking about earlier, DUI stops, what have you. You never stop. I have never stopped, and I have never blown past it at like 40, 50 miles an hour either. Okay?
No, you just go on through it slowly.
Either that or turn around. If you have to do it in the middle of the road, go right ahead. Again, if they want to pull you over, waste their time and pull you over for what they want to claim is an illegal U-turn, if you're exercising your right to travel freely without interruption, then they need a warrant to even pull you over. So, that's exactly right. Thing that, yeah, I mean, they don't know. They can't assume that you're turning around because you're drunk. You could be turning around because you're late for work, and now you have to go the other fucking way because there's a bunch of dickheads in your goddamn way trying to be like a bunch of Gestapos.
Right.
That's exactly right.
It's the people who allow this to happen. So that's one of the first things speaking from experience, that's one of the first things that I did was voiding myself of those contracts.
Yep. That is the first thing you have to do, because without those contracts, these officers cannot enforce statutory rules upon you. You identify them as peace officers, and they can only enforce law. And unless they've witnessed you breach the peace in some manner, they cannot do anything to you, regardless of if you have identification on you or not.
Notice how Rob said witness. They literally have to witness you do something.
Or someone has to report under penalty of perjury that this crime occurred.
Meaning that they have absolute evidence and proof without dispute that you have committed some sort of crime without incriminating themselves.
And if they don't know your name, that's evidence that they don't have that. Officer, do you know my name? No, so no report has been filed. No. Did you use emergency lights to stop me? Yes. Is this an emergency? No. That's a felony.
That's right. Using lights for a non-felony stop is a felony for a cop. Is that what you're trying to say, Rob?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
So, I mean, these are things that you can apply in your everyday life. But first, the very first thing you have to do is take the responsibility, take the initiative to actually get behind yourself. You have to know that you yourself, you own you. You control yourself. You have, and that inclines taking responsibility for your actions. And that means that when you do void yourself for these contracts, you're already knowledgeable and aware of your birthrights. All right, these are rights that are given to you when you are born. These are rights, like the alienable ownership that we were talking about, that are automatically given to you. Okay, only when you ascribe to the state is when you are defined as a citizen or a person.
That's exactly right.
But yeah, I was
Brandon, I don't know.
maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if you were on Facebook, Brandon, but if you go to the event page, there's some questions inside of a thread people are asking. If you want to go there and check that out, go ahead and see if you want to bring up any of that in the show.
Check it out.
Yeah, I mean, anybody can go there. It's the top thread, and scroll down, there's a couple of questions people have in that thread, things they were wondering about. And I encourage people to go ahead and call in. I mean, if they have questions, that's what we're doing these shows for. I mean, go ahead and call in. And,
there's something wrong with the, wouldn't be surprised, man. Is there something? Rob, earlier you were saying that you were in the host queue.
Yeah, I was.
He called in right at the top of the show, and I knew we were going to do an intro, so I was, I seen him when he popped in. And, you gave me the number before the show, so I knew it was Rob. But yeah, I'm glad Rob called in when he did.
What are the questions on the event page?
Let's see here. Says, who pays the sitting judge?
Can you? Well, there's a couple things on here. One's Irene Britton. Can you go into depth on how to file an LLAD title on land?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, all you have to do is type up a document, title it Affidavit Declaring Allodial Ownership, reference the property, whatever identifying indication you can give. If you want to give an address, go right ahead. You're not going to have any of your rights violated because of some statutory nonsense. So you can give an address on your affidavit if you like. That's absolutely fine.
Right.
You simply declare that you own the property completely, that no one else has any authority over it, and that's it. Allodial ownership of property is a very simple term, and even though spell checkers don't recognize it, it has a definition. It means complete ownership of property. End of story.
Yeah.
And then you just file it with your county recorder.
We did say earlier how to go about claiming that ownership and to file an affidavit of LLA ownership. Now, we want everybody to know that when you file, just because you are filing an affidavit, okay, to attain a certain right, you're not in any way violating or going to get in trouble for that affidavit.
No, absolutely not.
For trying to achieve that entitlement.
The only reason people have to use an affidavit in the first place is because they gave away that right to begin with, accidentally, because they didn't know any better. Now that they know better, they're using an affidavit to reclaim that right.
And you're not going to get in trouble for trying to reclaim that right.
No, absolutely not. It's not a crime to give an affidavit. You're swearing before a notary under penalty of perjury that everything you're saying is true. As long as you have a good faith belief that everything you're saying is true, no one can do anything to you for it.
That's right.
I mean, a recent event I had was I sent an email to the New York State Police because I saw one of their random checkpoints, and I told them next time I see one, I will get out of my car, take down all the names of the officers, and file criminal charges. So I received 2 sheriff's deputies at my door a couple weeks later regarding this email. They were actually very nice, and I just told them, yeah, I sent the email, and yeah, if I see another one, I'm going to do exactly what I said I'm going to do. They said, well, you're not in trouble. You can send a message to anyone you want. Of course I know that. I have the right to speak on any matter.
That's just, I can't believe they actually paid you a visit. That's fun.
What was that?
I can't believe they actually stopped by your house. That's kind of funny. They must not have recognized the ass kicking that you did with the ticket.
Yeah, I think they did recognize it, which is why they just treated me with respect and asked a couple questions and then left.
Wow. That's crazy, man.
It was actually a very pleasant visit. I wasn't even annoyed by the things they were asking me. And they listened to what I had to say, and then they left.
Yeah. That's always good.
The thing is, once you're inclined to defend your rights, and these authorities know you're inclined to defend your rights, you will have less of a chance to have to defend your rights because you're willing to.
Right. I think that's what a lot of people don't understand.
It's extremely rare that I'll see blinking lights in the rear view.
Right.
Yeah, and if you do see lights in the rear view, make sure you are in your right state of mind, which means that anytime that you get pulled over by a cop and you're trying to defend yourself, they will sit there and they will repeat the same question to you over and over again, 5 different times in 5 different ways, trying to get you to void your right of protection of property, which means, not subject to unreasonable search and seizures, which, essentially is your property, and that's essentially is what they're trying to obtain when they pull you over. All right. I mean, a cop's job is almost like a car salesman. All right. The more they get involved in the socio-economic structure of people's lives, the more of a corporate hacker they become. And I use the word hacker because that word actually means to change something, all right? And that's what these people do. They represent a corporation, all right? And these people are literally representing a corporation with a badge and a gun, trying to shit not only on your rights and take those away from you, but your child's as well. And that's why they try to take that property and that ownership so that you have nothing to drive, so that your kids can't obtain that ownership later on in life, say via house, property, whatever have you, rights. You can entail rights with that type of ownership too, because as you can see, in the last 10 years, with more people voiding their rights for sense of security, we have things that result in the Patriot Act and the extension of that via NAA Act, so on and so forth. And then again, notice how we are saying acts, and they are all entailed of taking our rights away. Yeah, everybody was inclined to believe it because it protected their quote-unquote freedoms.
Right. Good point.
The absolute first thing you should say when you're speaking to an officer, if they try to intimidate you in any way, is that you're now operating under protest and duress and activating your fee schedule. Everybody should have a fee schedule in place. It's an excellent deterrent against violations of your rights.
Do you want to explain to the listeners, Rob, exactly what that is?
A fee schedule is in place in case an officer wants to violate your rights. They do not always have a right to use a badge, gun, and intimidation to force orders upon you. Orders always generate liability for a bill. If they're giving you an order and they don't have a right to do so, you can charge them for that bill according to your fee schedule.
Wow.
It's just like if somebody kidnaps you and forces you to clean their floor. Fine, you don't have a contract, but you have a gun. I'll clean your floor, but I charge $1,000 an inch.
And, you know, it's really amusing because how you were saying, you know, you're talking to, you know, officers came by, what have you. I had a nice discussion with a sergeant not too long ago as well. Also very respectful type discussion. You know, nothing, no FTP, you know, fuck the police type thing.
Yeah.
But basically, it comes down to, you know, these people are essentially, they're supposed to be there for the citizens, for the people. Okay, that's what they're supposed to be there essentially for.
Right,
when
their
you
purpose
talk to
is
these
defined
people,
by the Declaration of Independence is to protect your rights.
right, exactly. And most of these people, you know, and that's why they're called civil servants, because they're citizens that are civilly serving their communities, okay? Now, and that actually entails customer service, because you're dealing with people and you're giving them service, and that's a customer base, okay? Now, most cops, when you talk to them, especially this one, will say things like, oh, well, I could never make it in customer service, so I had to be a cop, or something like that, you know? And you look at them and you just want to smack the hell out of them, because, you know, that's exactly what the fuck they are. They're a civil servant and they need to act like one, but they don't. They almost bribe their way out of situations by talking you into giving up your rights to achieve whatever you're setting your, you know, encounter is with them for. And
the second they're introducing intimidation into the mix, they're committing a crime. It's called intimidation in the free exercise and enjoyment of rights, or for having so exercised the same. It's a felony punishable up to a year in prison.
right. I mean, I personally, I've had, you know, experience with the cops that, you know, usually don't end in such good experiences, and that's because in the past I have not exercised my full rights of what is given to me to do so with, and mainly in the past I have noticed, and, you know, I'm not speaking of recently, but before I was, you know, actually aware of what was going on, you know, how susceptible I realized that I was. You know, I don't really look at myself as being a susceptible person to that type of corporation dealings anyways, and the reason why I refer to them as corporations is because literally they are, and that extends all the way down to their prison systems and the school systems, alright? And not to get off track, but real quick, the Corrections Corporations of America, the CCA, I think in 2010 it was, they sent every prison in every state, they sent forms basically for the prisons to be sold to CCA, Corrections Corporations of America. And, you know, the states were given an opportunity to sell that state or that property, that prison, that property to the CCA, or they would almost be forced into it. 2 years later, in 2012, they were actually forced into giving up the rest of that property, meaning most all prisons, California being the first, that privatized their prison system, meaning it's owned by one person or another. You know, it's a private ownership. So you have to think, if it's private ownership of a corporation, what are they coming after you for on the road? You know?
To get you to work for them as a slave for free.
That's right. Slavery by consent.
Well, they're not charging people with crimes, that's for sure. So when these people go into court, they're forming agreements with a court. They're contracting with them to serve a prison sentence. They're agreeing to it.
Right. Well, I was thinking
That's exactly right.
I think we take a little break here. If we could take a 5 or 6 minute break. All
right, sounds
if that's
good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
And get a drink of water, come back. We'll play a little music here. Actually, at the beginning of the show, we had a Payday Monsanto song, We the Sheeple of America. So I'll go into another track of his here, but like I said, we'll just take a couple-minute break, and we'll be back. All right?
Excellent. On the reverse side of the break, I'd like to talk about the practical methods for getting a notary public to cooperate with you.
All right. Sounds good. We'll be right back.
All right.
Operation Gladio! Gopher Token! USS Maine! USS Liberty! Swan Flow! 7-7! Oklahoma City! 9/11! Grassroots movements are rarely in existence. They get controlled and pigeonholed by the very same opposition. I can't believe you ain't canceling your subscription. You fell victim to the fraudulent two-party system. They both owned by the offshore banks. If you don't get on board with that, you walk the plank, point blank. They neutering the men, giving them estrogen. It's Nazi Germany on crack, steroids, and mescaline. They're pirates operating under a different law. Maritime admiralty shit, brother, is getting raw. School children getting put up against the wall for mandatory vaccines, which show them things against the law. Ain't it a shame all the games they play? Patriots under surveillance with some names they say. It's all controlled by blackmail and prostitution. You're about to see a real revolution.
Wake up, boy, there's a light at the window. I can hear someone knocking on the door. There are voices in the street and the sound of running feet, and they whisper the word.
The only unregulated private entity on the planet, this private, super secret bank, is the most secret aspect in all of the government.
The time has come to bring you back to us now like the prodigal son. Surely we can't stop fighting till we move as one in mind and purpose. Straight to our victory, certain over the man behind the curtain. So we reach out to wake up those willing to speak out and take action before we get the camps and the rations. Good and evil clashing in the 21st century. Make your choice now. Will you be a friend or an enemy of the true revolution against wicked institutions? They done set up the rulers, the evidence plentiful. Just read what they plan to do to us. In short, remove us from the planet, but we rock with the home court advantage. We done kicked off the revolution, now we expanded. Perpetrators and clowns against humanity reprimanded and punished. Where to go, follow the sound of feet running, and follow the sound of truth spitting like machine gunning.
Boy, there's a light at the window. I can hear someone knocking on the door. There are voices in the street and the sound of running feet, and they whisper the word.
People waking up in droves, but the media been trying to hide that. Playing tricks the car roll, trying to get you sidetracked.
But you can only fool some of the people, some of the time. Commit more crimes until the people are prized.
And he ain't lying, we just trying to get you elevated. That church is faking and Satan is getting celebrated.
They bombarding your brain with thoughts from the idiot box. A race to the bottom on your mark, but we too smart.
And we won't fall once the movement starts to snowball. Laurenberg too, who'll be on the roll call.
Please tell them.
The last 9 administrations.
Using them Nazi strategies, care for concentration of population and illegal wars on nations. To bring global government in due season.
That's why they argue that a carbon tax is needed. But they told to fail, the revolution can't be defeated.
Boy, there's a light at the window. I can hear someone knocking on the door. There are voices in the street and the sound of running feet, and they whisper the word.
They stole $14.8 trillion in 7 months. They're going for broke. This is it, dumbasses. There's no more time to screw around. Get yourselves in gear, police, and serve this system and decide whose side you're on. What do you think freedom's all about, you bastards? You people that serve the system. And I'm not talking about all the cops. I mean the ones that are bad. because you're the ones they're going to use against us. I'm talking to you all the time because you're the ones they're going to use like in Germany and Russia and China and everywhere else. It is now illegal to take photos of buildings in D.C., but there's no law. They have weapons, and it's their country, and they're going to ship the coke and heroin in, and your kids are going to use it and go to their own prisons, and they're going to make your kids take Ritalin and Prozac, and they're going to take your guns, and they're going to hurt you, and they got a lot of stupid goons, and they enjoy just destroying the republic. Okay, now I'm getting mad.
Yeah, so we're back. I was getting some comments on that choice of the song. I wanted to let people know, Payday covers a lot of what we talk about in our shows, and he's actually been a guest on one of our shows before. But I should have threw some rock music in there, but that's all right. The whole Alex Jones thing at the end of that song kind of threw me off.
Definitely. It's very important to understand that Payday is a lyricist, and he's actually involved in this movement as well. So much respect to him and what he does and what his
he'll be coming up.
contributes.
Yeah, we'll be having him on a part 2 episode as well coming up. But yeah, if we can get right back into it, I mean, I want to learn some more here.
Excellent. What I said I wanted to talk about was practical methods of getting cooperation from the notary public. The first thing you have to recognize is that most notary publics no longer know the full scope and power of their position. They're not aware of the duties and powers that they have. Most notary publics are used to simply verifying identification and witnessing oaths. That's really the most that they're going to be willing to do until you sit down, speak with them, and explain their powers and duties to them. Here in the state of New York, it's New York Executive Law Section 138 that defines the powers of a notary public. Almost every state has different laws, but they're almost all very similar. Some states like North Carolina have actually used their statutory rules to try to change what a notary public is, but that's not lawful. Just all notary publics in the country are equal. They all have the same powers and duties, regardless of what the statutory rules of the state says. What we're focusing on is a notary public cannot do anything with respect to documents that are for use in civil law. But this system and the documents we use are not for use in civil law. They're for use in common law. A common law notary public has absolute authority to handle such documents like a bill of exchange, a draft, a check, a note, notice, or any other kind of a negotiable instrument. They have the authority to hold these for collection. Now, that doesn't mean they're waiting to get paid money for it necessarily all the time. Their authority is to hold the bill of exchange to be collected by the person it's addressed to. So in order for someone to come in and pick up their bill of exchange, they would have to, in the cases that we use with notices, register a response with that notary. Then they can pick up their original bill of exchange, and they've honored that notice. The specific process and duty that we're looking for notaries to perform with respect to our notices is called protest for non-acceptance. And this is a specific power and duty that's given to the notary by their law. A notary public in the state of New York is ranked by executive law above a justice of the Supreme Court. As long as they're acting within an administrative capacity, they have complete authority. They can perform any duty of the lower officers beneath them. They can grant judgments with respect to these negotiable instruments. And these judgments cannot be overturned because they're not based on law or fact. They're based on you trying to avoid conflict, you offering discussion to avoid that conflict. And these documents for use in civil law the documents for use in common law are specifically the realm of the notary public. These are the documents we use in discussion, our notices.
Right.
The complete duty that we want them to perform is to hold our original document in a file, to create a certified true copy of that notice, to serve by a certified mailing the copy, and then wait for a response. If we get no response, the notary public then sends a notice of dishonor. It advises the other party that they're still holding this bill of exchange and that they're in dishonor for non-acceptance and that they have another 10, 15 days, whatever time frame you give, to accept the notice. The last notice that they send is protest for non-acceptance. And this essentially tells them that they have to accept this notice or they're going to enter a default judgment against them. And when that notice, that last protest notice, goes ignored, the notary public in that moment can grant a judgment, a declaratory judgment of permanent estoppel by acquiescence. Because the other party is not responding, it creates a mutual shared understanding between you and the other party on all points not refuted. So the judgment can be entered at that moment by the notary, and that can be held up in any court for any situation. This is why I say whenever someone goes to court using my work, by the time they get to court, they're already going to have a judgment in their favor granted by a notary in the matter. They'll be the only one that shows up because of this.
Right.
Yeah, that's very important information to know as well, because when you're out there trying to apply things like, if your rights are violated by a corporation, and when I mean corporation, I mean like, anybody that has to work for the state, cops, what have you, other people who hold duties for the states, when they violate your right, it is then your civil duty to actually act. And when you act, a notary can be your best friend. And
absolutely. And this will empower them.
Yeah, they can't deny it, is what Rob is trying to say, is that they can't deny you that right to pursue somebody just because they say, oh, this is a cop or what have you. Like, just for example, I'm not, putting it on, officers or what have you, but, I'm just, using them as an example. If somebody like that happens to violate your rights and you're trying to go after these people who have done so, and, the best way to get your right to hold somebody accountable for that violation, all right, is to go into it as in a legal manner, and that is to get a notary to back up your statement. That inclines that everything is truthful by punishable law. You're not perjuring yourself in any way by making these claims or statements or what have you. And as Rob was saying, a notary can adopt that to the point where if they're not answering you, they can always enter a judgment in your claim, meaning that, even if the notary is doing their job, okay, and they're responding and they're helping you with the process, they're signing, when they're doing that, if the person that they're enacting that on is not responding, all right, they have the responsibility and the duty to actually bring forth the judgment in that claim.
That's right. Back when people understood duty, notices were a very common process. You can use a notice. This is very important. You can use a notice to offer discussion to avoid conflict in any situation where you can foresee conflict arising. It doesn't matter what that situation is. You offer discussion to avoid that conflict. You receive no response. You win by default. It works every single time.
I was going to say that something just snapped. I was like, it sounds a little familiar to what we were talking to pertaining to what I personally need to do. I don't know if I'm ready to discuss all that, but I just wanted to say that kind of clicked.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to let you know that kind of clicked right there. But yeah, that's basically what, we need to enact our rights, and to do that we have to take responsibility for our claims, and we have to act on that ourselves. And we're not out there alone. these notaries help us get us done, along with the sheriffs too. If you need to make, an initial statement or something like that, those are always like, the quickest go-tos for that type of stuff as well, to get it documented right away.
Hey, well, what you're doing with these notices is you're actually writing your own law, which is what it means to be sui juris and self-governing. And as long as you're speaking of the truth, there's nothing to stop anyone from writing their own law in any matter.
That's right. A lot of people out there, they're not accustomed to this type of knowledge because they're not used to having conscious thought. They're not used, that individual thought process is absolutely depleted to the point where people actually think by enacting of sui juris you're violating some sort of right. That's absolutely not true, because sui juris only acts within your rights. And a lot of people, when they first obtain this knowledge or hear this knowledge, a lot of them, they deny their rights so far to the point where, people would like to say, oh, well, you can't write your own laws. That's hearsay. That's like, you do this, I do that type thing. Well, you know what? That's law. That's exactly how it's supposed to go. You defend yourself with law, because law itself is meant to defend the person or the public in its manner, meaning that laws, you use laws to defend yourself against other laws that are said to be broken.
Your rights are the highest law.
Right. No, go ahead.
As far as cooperation goes, explaining the duties of the notary to them and empowering them with their knowledge is the best way to get their cooperation. They can see that you're simply asking them to do things that the law authorizes them to do. It's right in front of them. And at that point, they cannot refuse to perform you this service, because it's not called powers and optional services if someone feels like performing them. It's called powers and duties, executive law.
Right, I have a question here, too, from the chat room.
Excellent.
Somebody asked, if you need a license for commercial things, wouldn't you want to keep your license?
If you're engaged in a commercial activity and you require a license, yeah, you'd want to keep your commercial license for that.
Right.
Engaging in that activity does not prejudice your rights in any way.
Right.
Like,
I'm glad people are active in this show, though.
If you need a license, say, to drive toxic material, okay, because that's your job to do that, all right? That's your license that you obtained for your job. That does not apply to your your everyday driver's license. That's something completely different. The only time you need a license is when you're operating under commercial law. But that's the reason why we need to understand that they look at us as commercial product, okay? That's why we're inclined to go and get these licenses and void ourselves of these rights, because they have manipulated that soft-kill notion of, that into our heads, all right, that we need to do that, and we don't.
And
that's absolutely right. The commercial permit this gentleman has for transporting toxic materials, that's completely different from his right to travel in his private property. He would not present his commercial driving permit when he's operating his private automobile. They're two unrelated acts. One is a regulatable activity because it's commerce. Government has the authority to regulate commerce. They can require you to have a permit to do commerce on the roads. No one has a vested right to earn a living on the roads in that manner. But when it comes to your private travel, your license is not related to that whatsoever. Your private travel is exactly that, private travel and transportation upon the nation's commonways. That's a fundamental right that cannot be licensed.
Got you. Also, we have a caller on the line here. I think it's Brian, who's actually a host on the network with me and Brandon on some shows. But he's kind of wanting to learn about this topic, so he's been on hold for a while. I wanted to see if he had a question or anything. All right.
All right, we'll take it.
All right. Hello, Brian. You with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. How you
How you
doing,
doing,
man?
Brandon? How you doing? Is it Robert?
No, Rob.
Yep, Robert.
Rob.
Well, yeah,
How you
yeah.
doing? Yeah, I appreciate the show. I've been listening for at least about an hour now, and I'm just blown away. I haven't heard a lot of this stuff, so I'm always interested to learn. Sometimes I've shared these kind of conversations with Brandon, and we talk about the difference between like Capital Maximus and who you really are, and what these things actually represent in a court of law. And I don't know if you had talked about that when I wasn't here. I missed the first part, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how somebody would address themselves in court if they were addressed as Capulus Maximus when they know that's not them, without actually like sounding crazy or. If that
Well, the
makes
only
sense.
way that I would present myself in any court, I don't care what the matter is by special appearance sui juris. That's how I would appear in any matter that is brought against me.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, Brian, he can go ahead and I think he's new to the group as well that you have on Facebook, and, maybe he can go through some of the files and other things, like some of the people listening to the show, and kind of get caught up on it. I mean, me and Brandon, we talk about it a lot, so.
Yeah, the best way to appear in any matter, it doesn't matter if it's a criminal charge or some civil charge or a lawsuit, you always want to appear sui juris and make special appearance to first challenge jurisdiction. That's something very important about special appearance. When you make special appearance, you're not consenting to the court's jurisdiction. You're there only to challenge the court's jurisdiction. When you appear by general appearance, you've automatically consented to jurisdiction, and it doesn't matter what you do from there, you've already lost. By making special appearance, you force the court to prove that there is a complaining party who has sworn under penalty of perjury some damage or injury against you. If this doesn't exist, then there is no jurisdiction. You conclude your special appearance, and you're free to go. There's absolutely nothing they can do to stop you from walking out the door. And the charges have to be dismissed because there's no jurisdiction.
Interesting.
This is true of any matter where there is no private or where there is no real party of interest, no complaining party who's filing a charge declaring under penalty of perjury that you violated their rights or damaged their property. It doesn't matter what the case is. If that doesn't exist, there is no case.
That's why we stress the ticket issue, because it's where people are most vulnerable, and this is where people are most amplified to actually extend their rights and exercise them. Because when a cop, like Rob is saying, nobody's there to answer it. It extends again back to the corporation. They're just out there these cops are out there to make their quotas, and they're giving out tickets under corporation orders. There's nobody there to technically back that up unless there's a substantial amount of evidence, like unless the cop actually seen you commit a crime and has it on, his dash cam or what have you. It's then easier to prosecute that person and put him away, because then you have the corporation speaking in their interest, which is technically not even the corporation if it's something like the camera or, as I said, actual physical witnesses of crime by the police itself.
Right, I have absolutely no objection to the way the system prosecutes actual crime. What my objection is to those things which are labeled crime. And those things which are labeled crimes that are not a damage or a violation to someone else are not crimes. They're just statutory code contract infractions. They have nothing to do with crime.
and that's why it's important to live sui juris. Like, literally, this is not something, like I said, you gotta have one foot in the door. You have to live sui juris, because these happen in everyday life, and everyday, instances where our lives can completely change by us just not protecting them.
Well, they've already done that.
Right, exactly. And they proceed to do it.
If people were to just start out of the blue, carrying guns on their hips and walking into stores with them, the normal individual would freak out because of the state of affairs with regards to our rights lately. They actually want you to believe that you have an obligation to remove your weapon before you walk into a place of business, which is not true. Your rights exist wherever you happen to be. It doesn't matter if you're out in public, walking around. You're free to exercise the full realm of your freedom anywhere, anytime.
And that's why that's why things like tickets are considered things like violations. And that's another thing we're going to have to cover, in another episode, is the linguistic manipulation of law, a definition of law and words, and how that linguistic manipulation turns into redefining or trying to redefine actual definitions by redefinition. I know
that's absolutely a show all in itself. You're definitely right on that.
That's definitely something to cover on, because understanding a lot of what to do is understanding exactly how it entails to you. And all this really, if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for your kids. If you don't have kids, do it for your neighbor's kids, or, do it for the future, because in order for us to have any type of sustainable future, it has to be up to the individual on their self to know that they have the power to not only claim responsibility for themselves, but their actions. Most people, they hear that and they think, oh, just because they hear responsibility, that's what I mean by manipulation of words. People hear responsibilities or claim, and they think, oh, well, it almost feels like a burden to some people. Okay, I don't know about you, but I don't feel protecting or defining my rights to be a burden. Okay, so it is kind of shitty that when living sui juris, you actually have to exercise this in everyday life. But if we all do this together and we exercise this as a community, then that extends as the social norm. And we can excuse we can excuse the sickness for what we define as law now.
That's absolutely right. What is considered to be law is an absolute disease. It invades people's minds and makes them believe things that just aren't true.
Common and civil law does not apply to the free-willed. It does not apply to that person.
That's absolutely right. And these word twists, right now in the meantime, the most important thing to understand is that they do not affect you. So if you don't know all of them, it's okay. You're not going to be in trouble because you don't speak legalese. You're not going to allow these words to have influence over you. When you appear in court and you act upon your own law, you're acting upon your own definitions of the words that you're using. You're not consenting to the definitions of the words that they have twisted and redefined, so you cannot comprehend them.
That's right. That's exactly true. And that's why to understand linguistic manipulation is so important. And once you do understand and get the better know-how of how words are changed and redefined, sometimes, for example, sometimes you'll hear the president say, it's better because it's good. Well, in that sentence right there, he just used better and good to define one thing. Both words, better and good, means kind of for the betterment or, for the good of things. Therefore, to put two words in that mean the same thing, you're redefining your whole statement. In other words speaking, most people would say, "Oh, well, that's a good thing." Just because they heard them say normal or better or good all in one sentence, they think, "Oh, well, that's a good thing." When in reality, as I said, because of the linguistic manipulation, whatever he's saying is actually twisted or turned around to be sound and interpreted in a light manner, in an okay manner.
Right. Our president is a complete idiot. I hate his politics. I cannot stand the thing he does. And you wanted to talk about Obamacare earlier. I think it's a good opportunity to bring that up now since we're talking about Obama, the idiot.
Without a doubt.
Obamacare is completely voluntary, as you mentioned. It is 100% voluntary for everybody. There's a section within the bill, H.R. 3590, which is the root of Obamacare. It's Section 1555. It's freedom not to participate in federal health insurance programs. And this provision makes the entire bill voluntary. And the only reason that there's hype surrounding exemptions is to create that false perception of a mandate that doesn't exist. No one has an obligation to participate in Obamacare. They just have been manipulated to believe that they do.
That's right. The manipulation extends to, everything from law to what we view on TV, and that's why it's so prevalent in our everyday political lives. In other words, when we see our president signing executive orders, we don't even stop to think, what is an executive order? Where did an executive order originate from? So on and so forth.
Well, an executive order applies only to the executive branch. The notion that an executive order could be applicable to the people is absolutely ludicrous and has no basis in law, fact, or reality.
Thank you.
Right.
Can I ask something about Obamacare?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I was just wondering, a lot of people think it's about health care, but when most people actually study, the 1,000+ pages, they realize it's not about health care, it's about power.
Population control.
Let's talk about the whole bailout that was never talked about, and that's the college student loan bubble that was there. And they actually passed law to make sure that these people can never shed in bankruptcy their student loans that they just started inflating faster than healthcare costs. And then
you must mean the money that they stole from the birth certificate revenue of the people.
That, and then the additional amount they created on top of that, that became bigger than the credit card bubble. And then they knew it was going to implode. So what did they do? They said, the government will just take over all that under this health care bill. And you'll get a free pass and get, 100% on the dollar, as always. And the other thing that people don't know is that this bill also gave them access to everybody's bank account information.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a matter of fact, people were actually paying for that bill. People were being taxed for that bill a year before that bill even came out.
You got to pass it to see what's in it.
Yeah. That's a great policy. We should do that with everything else. Let's get this bill entitled the Kill Cops Act and pass it. You got to pass it to see what's in it.
Yeah, we don't read it. We just pass it.
Congress is a disgrace. Let's start with the fact that Congress was given the authority to regulate the currency of the country through the Bureau of Weights and Measures, which means it has to be physical gold or silver. Congress was never authorized to outsource the currency of the country to a third party, especially not some criminal international bank.
Right.
IMF.
Through that. Federal
That's
Reserve
the truth
Bank.
right there.
Yeah, it extends. Our politics extend way beyond criminal activity. They extend to violations of human and civil rights, and it's basically in the late '80s we exchanged the mafia for a global political elitist type corporation mafia, and we're
corporatocracy.
most of our corporatocracy, right? Merger of corporation and politics. And that's just ever so prevalent now in everyday life. I mean, we literally witness it all the time.
Yeah, the best part is they don't even need to have the manpower to spy on you, because they can just send little robots into, little YouTube videos and be like, we heard this word and this phrase, and therefore they are terrorists.
Yep.
And it's all generated by revenues that come from you being traded on the New York Stock Exchange.
There we go.
And do you have more resources as far as links that people would go to, like that, or things that people should Google? Because, everybody's heard Jordan Maxwell talk about this. There's a couple, little things out there here and there, but it's really one of those things that's always kind of sketchy when you're always trying to prove it to somebody, I'm sure you could probably do it way better than most of us.
Right.
So I'm sure anyone who's dedicated can find the simple evidence that every state and that the whole country is a corporation. It's not even hidden anymore. The Federal Reserve appears in not in the government section, but in the yellow pages or the white pages, I think. The Federal Reserve is not a part of government. It's so easy to prove that. They won't even deny it.
But I'm talking about the birth certificate on the exchange, how you would find that, and how that is actually legit.
Well, they like to keep that secret. What you need is a stockbroker, and you need your long-form birth certificate. And then you have that stockbroker run the red CUSIP ID number on the back of that birth certificate, and it will bring up an account. They may not want to tell you what it's about, but it will bring up an account.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually just I posted some in the event page. I actually posted the UCC codes, UCC 1-308 contract code, which that is actually operated under. So that's another place where you can go to. I'll even post the original site that I had gotten that from, but that's the codes in which they operate under in order to keep your certificate of live birth until you request for your certificate of live birth.
That's right. Most people don't realize that what they have is not their original birth certificate. They think it is because it's on some impressive-looking piece of paper, but that's not at all what it is. What people have is a certified true copy of their birth certificate. What they want to obtain is their original birth record, and that original record is supposed to be on file with whoever is giving out the certified true copies, because a true copy can only be generated from an original if that original birth record does not exist at the facility that's handing out certified copies. They're committing a fraud. Every one of those documents that they create called certified true copy of birth certificate is fraud if it's coming off microfiche. That original birth record has been transformed into a security. Just like when you enter a promissory agreement and you sign a promissory note, what the bank does is they package that promissory note together with a whole bunch of other promissory notes, deposit them into an interest-bearing account, and turn it into a security where people can buy it. It's insured, they trade it, they do all kinds of sorts of things with it, and they make a fortune off of these while you're paying on it.
That's amazing.
Basically, you're paying for yourself to have unattainable rights, and that's what people say with Obama. They say, "Oh well, he doesn't have his birth certificate. He couldn't, he couldn't provide one, so on and so forth." When in actuality, no president, none of them, not even Reagan, produced an original certificate of live birth, because every time a certificate of live birth is signed, that is claiming, like Rob was saying, security. That security is entitlement to ownership of property, meaning you. Hence, laws like habeas corpus, to retain one's body, to retain oneself. Okay? So, anytime that you are complying with that record of birth, meaning that every day that you let that go by without obtaining that you are being represented as a product, as a security. And that first started during during the 1900s with the Great Depression, in order to get out of that type era, we didn't have any type of infrastructure or what have you to put up, so we put up our people for stock.
Right.
For security. We put up our people, because people equal labor. You see what I'm saying? Labor and more people equal more debt, so on and so forth.
Yeah, man. Thank God for this show tonight, man. I learned a lot tonight. We got just over 5 minutes left.
How about we talk about authorized signature for a moment?
Yeah, that's fine.
Go for it.
Everybody get a magnifying glass, if you can get one, and look at your check where you sign your name. It is not a solid line. It says authorized signature repeatedly.
Wow.
What this does is it empowers who you send your check to use your signature on your behalf. What they're doing is they're discharging the security interest for you when you send a check to pay a bill. You're not paying a bill, you're discharging a debt. And if you pay it by check, you're authorizing to whom you sent the check not only to discharge it on your behalf, but to take a fee from your personal bank account equal to the debt for administrating the discharge. That's what the authorized signature does.
Yeah, and it's any time that you are forced to sign your name and then print your name, and every time that you're doing that, and when you're filling out insurance forms, you're sitting there at the doctor's office, what have you, and you're filling out, and not only are you signing your names, but you're legibly printing your name in capital letters because you're told to do so. Okay, that's another state of ownership. See what I'm saying? So
right, they're forcing you into contract.
Right, exactly. And the very first thing, like I said, that we can all do about this, the very first thing that we can do is we can start to void ourselves of the minute type contracts that we are already in, like driver's license and so on and so forth, and to take responsibility for the claims that we don't have those rights to travel and so on and so forth freely without there being interruption of that process and a person having the right to do that. So meaning that if somebody says that you don't have that right, we need to challenge that.
The easiest way to void out all those contracts, you can do it all in one notice. You send notice of understanding intent and claim of right to your county sheriff. I have an example of this notice up in the group files that people can actually use. You notarize it, you serve it certified mail return receipt, you get your green card back. This notice claims all of your rights, it voids all of those contracts, and it does it all at once. You send it to the county sheriff because the county sheriff is the highest position of law in the county. The county sheriff is equal to your president.
We were going to cover
that. The county sheriff, all of the police in the county work under the sheriff. So notice to agent, notice to principal, every police officer is noticed of your rights when you send your notice to the county sheriff. They are noticed that you've revoked these contracts, that you're not bound by these statutory laws. So any of their actions to violate your rights after that notice are willful. That's why you have a fee schedule on file, because they're criminals invading your rights, and you have a right to collect for that.
That's very, very important to understand. I'm very glad that you brought that up, Rob.
You know, we can cover that on the next show.
You can collect on your fee schedule through the notary public. You collect on your fee schedule through the notary the same way you do with your notices.
Right, we need to get into that. That'll be part 3.
Excellent.
I would love to hear that. I just want to thank everybody. Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Brandon and Brian, and all of our callers. I think we got just over a minute, so we don't run over.
All right, let's
awesome
spread
show
this
tonight.
link as far and wide as we can.
Yeah, we will. As soon as it's archived, I'll distribute it.
Real quick, I wanted you to have the opportunity real quick to get all your information out there as far as your book and all that one more time before we get off air in case anybody wants to follow up with your book. As it's well worth it, because if anybody goes, like I said, to the webpage, you'll see right in and of itself, it just pays for itself. Right on the page of the net, there's the ticket and how to go through that whole process right there as well. So
that's absolutely right. The book is Sui Juris, The Law of Full Age, Your Sovereign Claim to Unalienable Individual Rights. The website is www.suijurislaw.net, and the Facebook group is Sui Juris Law, the Self-Governing.
Awesome. There we go. All right, guys. Thanks,
yep,
Rob.
looking forward to it.
It's been a great show.
Yeah, looking forward to part 3.
Care. Yeah, definitely.
All right, anytime.
All right, take care. Thanks.
You too. Bye.
Good night, everybody.